does the same thing, but does it for row, obviously. So if I put row on, let's pick something, on, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Apple is in the 7th row, right? So if I select Apple, I get the value 7. So that's interesting in and of itself, but it becomes much more powerful when you use it with other functions. So index, right. So the index function actually looks up a row and column and returns the value. So let's say I have this array going from CI 7 here to CL 22 here. And I want to know what's in the second row and in the second column. 1, 2, 1, 2. So the value in the second row and the second column is 90. So if I use index along with the row column values, I can find a value in an array. Now let's do one step better than that. So what is match and what is match with index? And what does this have to do with row and column, okay? So, and this is a lot of stuff and this is pretty complex. So let me walk through it and stop me if there are any questions. So Vlookup, which I'm sure many of you have used, and for those of you who haven't, I'll explain to you what it is. Vlookup is a data search function that looks up a value in an array using various lookup factors. So what Vlookup does is it takes a lookup value that you have. So in this case, I'm looking for the word Danish, which I've put here. It looks in a data range. So in this case, it's going from IM7 to IP22. Additionally, you have to tell it, again, Excel reminds you here. So what are we looking up? The lookup value is Danish. What's the array? The array is IM7 to IP22. What is the column index number we want? The column index number is 3. So what would we expect if we look up Danish and we want the value in the third column? 1, 2, 3. We would expect the value yes for yummy. And that's in fact what it is. If I change the value here, now that we have that set up, and I looked up ham, ham is not yummy, even though in actuality it is. And that's that value. If I went to quantity, right, and I changed the formula to look up the second column, for ham, you would expect it to go 1, 2, so you expect a value of 20. Great, right? And there's a companion HLOOKUP function that looks up rows rather than columns. So what are the problems with VLOOKUP? A few things. One is, in terms of looking up, it's not very versatile. It only looks up one data point, and it only goes in one direction. So VLOOKUP only looks up right and looks up down. It doesn't go upwards. The second thing is, if you VLOOKUP in an array, the data has to be alphabetized. And a lot of times one forgets to do that. So VLOOKUP is a significantly inferior function to index combined with match. And I think because it's easier to use at first, understandably, a lot of people hook into VLOOKUP, but like one of the first things I do with people when I work with them at functions is to purge it from their life forever. So let me show you how index match works and why when you get used to it, you'll end up, I think, liking it a lot more.
Amir, I have a quick question on what you said about the way VLOOKUP doesn't go up. It just goes, VLOOKUP, it goes down.
Oh, sure.
What do you mean by it doesn't look up?
Sure. So I guess what I mean is that's a great question. So it goes with the alphabetization point. So what VLOOKUP does is what it's literally doing is It's going through every row downwards, and it's saying, okay, is this value ham? No. Is this value ham? No. And so forth. That's why it has to be alphabetized, because it can't go upward. So if I was to take this array and literally invert it and put papaya on the top and put apple on the bottom, the entire VLOOKUP would break and it would just give me a ref.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Yeah. Actually, you made a really good point. The better way to say it is, the way that VLOOKUP functions is, it iterates its lookup in a downwards and rightwards direction and does not know how to iterate in the reverse direction. Great question. So for index...
Wait, Amir.
Yep.
So, are you saying that you would just have to reset it? It doesn't have to be alphabetical, the order. It just... Or, like, what are you saying?
Yeah, so let me show you. So check this out. So we looked up papaya, right? What if I change this value to papaya, right? So, bear with me. Let's say I put, what do I want to do to show this point best? I'll put, let's see. I'll put, so what ends up happening is, if you, I'm trying to think what's the easiest way I can break it that comes up in practical terms. Let's see. So, I got it. I think I know what to do. So, if you put down, here's the best way to do it. So if you looked up in a column and you didn't have the names in the array alphabetized, and there was an inexact match in the table, there are cases where VLOOKUP can break. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you had, it doesn't come up for simple examples, but it comes up when you have a lot of data. So let's say we were looking at like a drug company, like let's say Merck, right? And let's say Merck had 6 names in a customer table. So they had like a Merck Brazil, Merck Chile, etc. And they had like 14 entries in the table. And you wanted to look up Merck in that table. And you just blindly put it in, looking for what the value was in the table. And you wanted to know what the bookings are. There are instances where if one of those Mercs comes up first in the table and VLOOKUP is looking for an approximate match, there are instances where it will draw the first value in the table.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it mostly is for compound search terms where they're not alphabetized, and it's a classic use case. The reason I was struggling for a moment is I realized that in day-to-day things that you're doing like a simple table, it wouldn't come up. But in something like Salesforce, where you're pulling down a very large table of multiple names, many of which might have the same word in them, VLOOKUP can often break down or pull an earlier value in the table that is not what you intended to pull.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good question. Took me a while to think through that one, but appreciate the question. So what happens with index matches let me build up to it. So when you do the match function, match looks up for an exact value and looks it up in the table. If that exact value does not exist, and you need to use a toggle for that, which I'll show you, it will not return a match. So let me show you, because it's easier to explain that way. let's say that I type in the word apple here, and I put match, and I want to look for apple, the lookup value, comma, in this lookup array. And I'm going to put comma 0. I want an exact match. It will come back with the value 1. So it's telling me apple is the first value in this array. To the point that I just explained about VLOOKUP, if I put apple pie, it will tell me value not available. The reason this is powerful is, if I similarly do a match value in the other direction, and let's say I put the word yummy, and I put match lookup value, right? And I'll put 0 for exact match. You'll see it comes up with 3. So it found the exact value here for yummy. If you remember the index function looks up a value in a specific column and row. But the weakness of index is, if I look in this array and I ask for the value in the second row and the second column, it gives me 90 because it's banana and the second row and the second column. But of course, the weakness of this, right, is how do I know it's banana, and how do I know where banana is, and how do I know where quantity it is? The way you do that is you combine it with match. So this looks complicated, but I promise it's not. So imagine, you see this index formula that I had back here? Let me copy it and bring it over. This index formula, if I put it here for you, it's the same table, so I'll just use this one. Right? This index table is looking at this table and is basically saying what's the second row and what's the second column. Instead of that, you can combine index with match. So I put in index, but instead of here manually typing in 2 and 2, for those values of 2, I put in the match formula that we used here. So I say for the row, so this is the array, this is the row. For the row number, look at DM6 through DM22 and tell me what the matching value is here. So I've typed in banana. For the column value, I've said, look in the header and tell me where yummy is. So you'll see that the net result is, let me delete all of this so you can see it better. It goes down to banana and across to yummy and looks up the value. If similarly I type healthy, it will go over and pull yes. If instead of healthy I put quantity and I put in corn, it will move over and pull this value. So now, as a result of setting that index match table up, I can look anything up in the table. I can look it up in any direction. It won't pick up duplicates, and it can go in either direction. Any questions about that? I know that's a little bit of a tricky one. All right. I'll take silence for bemused excitement. So let's go back over here and go back to where we were in our list.